These are the stories we share around the dinner table, tell in front of the campfire, and listen to on our porch. This is a place where tales are told and stories are heard. Grab your tea, your cocoa, your whiskey, your wine. Welcome to the Storyteller's Porch with your host, Jill Davis.
Welcome back to the Storyteller's Porch. This is your host, Jill Davis, and this is part 2 of our storytelling time on the porch with Scott. I can't wait for you to hear the conclusion to his thrilling story. We're picking up where we left off from Scott putting $15,500 in his pocket and ready to travel the world. Come with us as we explore his adventures and perhaps learn a little bit about the collective impact of his travels.
A multiple effect. And sure enough, 18 months later, I sold that house for $36,000 and I walked out of that bank with $15,500. Now, this is in 1979, right around October that I sold that house. I had $15,500. And the whole year and a half up to that, I'd been planning my escape. I was going to do the Carl trip. And sure enough, and all my friends knew, but when I actually left, they were going, "You're really going to do this?" I said, "This is the only thing that matters to me." So in November of 1979, I'm 23 years old. I hop onto a plane, the first plane I'd ever been on in my life, to go and leave America for the first time ever. And I actually landed in London. And the reason I chose London was because I thought, well, why not? I'm not that good with directions, so I'll just go east and keep going until I come out the other end. You know, like I landed from Australia or wherever, Japan, I didn't know where, and land somewhere in California in some amount of time. And I had this vague notion of being gone for 3 years. And I figured, that enough money. And I took a lot of notes from Carl. And I knew that even though everyone said, "Now you can't work in different countries," I knew I would figure out a way that when, to kind of supplement so I don't go through my $15,400 in 3 years, I could, figure it out. So I took it. And the reason I landed in London was because at the time there was a airlines called Freddie Laker Airlines. And for $99, this was the first time that they kind of broke open the whole, idea of traveling cheap. For $99, I landed in England. Now, it took me a few weeks to kind of get my bearings. And initially I would stay at like hostels, youth hostels. But I really quickly figured out like, okay, this is not the way I want to travel. This was kind of the more like travel light, and I wanted to get down to the ground. I wanted to meet people. I wanted to worm my way into the local houses and I get invitations and hang out with just people who lived wherever it was they lived. And soon I found myself into Europe and I kind of had that same vibe as I thought, it's not really what I wanted. I had nothing against Europe, but I wanted to get into like countries that maybe weren't so developed. I guess that's the way to put it. And I remember I was heading down at the time. I was still taking trains, and stuff like, modern ways. And I remember, and sure enough, I would meet every day. Every day I would wake up and I'd think, I want to work on being more courageous. I want to work on being more confident. Today, I'm going to go and I'm going to scan the room, scan a place, and go up to someone that I don't know and said, "Excuse me, I saw you sitting there, blah, blah, blah," and introduce myself and worm my way into conversations because I was starting to develop this confidence and I wanted to know what that was like. And sure enough, I'm on some train and all of a sudden someone says, "Man," after talking, they say, "You really should go to Israel." To just show you the level of small town. I was just a naive kid from a tiny, tiny town. I didn't even know where Israel was. I didn't know that it was the land of, I didn't know who Jewish people were. I didn't know. And he said, "Yeah, there's these farm collectives called kibbutzes, and they allow you to, international travelers to go work there. You got to work there, and you pretty much work for free. But man, it's cool because people come from all the world." I said, "That's my next destination." And I'll never forget taking a boat from Greece to Tel Aviv. And the guy had said, "Look, there's two government-run places to get into the kibbutzes. You got to go to these places because they'll line you up. Well, I go to these places. You wake up in the morning and you go 2 hours to get buses and it's this official building. And as soon as I go there, I realize, okay, this is the loser's way to do this, because out the door is a line of 40, 50 backpackers, and they're all trying to get in. And I line up. And they say, "Are there?" And I says, "Man, they're all filled up. They're not taking any more applications." And I think, applications? I am not doing it this way. So I quickly leave. There's someone there that's next to me, and I say, "This is the." He says, "Man, let's go down to a lot. They just opened up the border there They just gave back this place called the Sinai Desert, which there was a war. You didn't know because you're too naive and you come from a small town. But they had a war with Egypt, and Israel finally said, "All right, we're going to give you back this chunk of now that we're not killing each other, we're going to give it back." So I went down to this a lot, and it was incredible. It's the Red Sea. And one of the things that I wanted to do on this trip was become a diver. I wanted to scuba dive. I wanted to snorkel dive. And oh my gosh, the Red Sea is just extraordinary. It's crystal clear water. It was just incredible. I was sleeping on the beach. I was meeting all these people. There were dances at night and eating falafels and, hanging out with the Bedouins. And I mean, it was just incredible. And sure enough, and, I'm young and I want to meet women. And sure enough, there's 2 Swedish women I meet, and they had lived on a kibbutz. And I said, "What? How did you do that?" "Oh, well, here's the address." And I said, "Wow, I went to that place." And I said, No, don't do that. Just go up to the front gate. Ask for Ayelet. And I was like, and if that one doesn't work, go to the one next door. It's about 4 miles down the road, and try that one. So, man, I'm like, all over this. So I hitchhike back up. It's way, way north and I find myself, I remember too, I got left off by this truck driver at, 11 o'clock at night. And I think I'm close to it, but I figure I'm exhausted, so I just go and lay down in this olive farm, and I, camp there for the night, and I wake up in the morning and I eat my bread and my cheese and stuff. And I'm walking down and I ask someone who drives by, and I say, "Do you know where Shar Hagalan is?" And they say, "Oh yeah, you're really close to it. You go here." So it's like 6:30 in the morning. I show up at this gate, and of course this is Israel. So everything is kind of, they got guns. Everything is, and it's right on the border. I didn't know this, but it's literally on the border of Jordan where, they can lob bombs, and they used to lob. It was crazy. So I go up there, and there's guards there, and they're very friendly, and they just say, "Hi, I'm here. And I remember puffing myself like, I got to really show I'm really strong and confident, and I know what I'm doing, and I remember walking up there and say, "I'm here to, look." And they said, "Well, I don't, that's not how we do it here." But, and all of a sudden down the road comes this woman, short, Israeli woman. And I wave, and she says, "Hello." I say, "I want to be one of your volunteers, and I'm really good." And I start, she's laughing, and, she says, "Okay." I mean, I walk on and I become a volunteer on this group. So that's just kind of what I wanted to have, these experiences where you just break every rule. You're not to be illegal, but to just go, wait, is this really the only way that you can get through life? Is this really, or is there other ways? Is there a way when someone says, "No, you can't do that"? Is that really true? So that's what I was constantly trying to see if that were true. And that's what I was experiencing. So I work on the kibbutz for 6 weeks. Oh my gosh, the stories, the people I meet, my address book is filling up. Got to come see us in Denmark. Oh, when you get down to South Africa, oh, this and that and that. Long, long story. So this is how I'm traveling. Now, I could go on and on about all the traveling, but I'd rather just go down to one of the most powerful stories. I am now down in South Africa. I had been traveling now for a year and a half, and I was kind of tired. I really wanted some kind of sure enough, right before Christmas, I find myself in South Africa, which is a trip and a half, because back then everyone hated South Africa. There was apartheid, and no one was giving visas, but someone said, "Okay, you do this, you fly here, and you go to this, and you go to the up there, and there's one place here, and you knock on the door." I'm not kidding. It was like something out of a movie. And sure enough, there's a place where you can get a 3-month visa into South Africa, and I found a way to do it, and I landed in South Africa. So I'm down there, and I meet some people that I had met 6 months earlier. And I go, they say, if you ever through there, come stay with us. Oh my gosh, my parents would love you. They love Americans and they love, and I'm exhausted. And I end up going to Durban and knocking on their door. It's like 10:30 at night. They're students and they knock on the door and they go, whoa, Scott. And I end up staying there for 6 months, they needed to rent another room. I was exhausted. So I thought, oh, this is a good place to get a job. So I got a job. I'm building custom saunas in South Africa. This is what I was doing, using my carpentry skills. It was so great too. I remember when I applied for the job, they said, okay, great, come tomorrow. And I said, okay, so, I got a lot of tools. I've got none. I said, what tools am I going to need? Oh, all you're going to need is a speed square, this, bring your belt, do the tape measure and stuff like that. That just the basics and we'll have all the rest. I go, okay, excellent. I can bring those. I go out, I walk to the nearest hardware store. I pick up all that stuff brand new. I just go, okay, I know what I'm doing, and I'm walking and I got the job. And later on, I actually got another job where they gave me a van. I'm in Durban, which is one of the best surfing capitals of the world and body surfing. And I'd become an absolute passionate fan of body surfing. So I have this van that after the first week, they said, you don't have to drop the van off each time. Just, go park it in your place where you live and then, come to work. And I'm like, okay, I will do that. And so there at 5:30 in the morning, I'm taking all my mates, who live in there, who are going to school. We're all going down to Durban Beach and surfing at 5:30 in the morning till 7 before they went to school and before I went to work. I've got photos of that is just stunning. They're like, where'd you get a van, Scott? I said, oh, from work, So while I'm there, one of the last things I wanted to do was sail. I wanted to sail around the world. There's a yacht club down there. And I think, that's where they're probably going to come in. And sure enough, back then to young people, before there was Craigslist and, Facebook and everything else, they had boards. They had cork boards, and there was 3x5 cards. And if you sold anything that was related to, wherever it is that you're there, or you had an announcement or something, and I would go down there every weekend and check the cork board, check the announcement board. And sure enough, one time I saw there, it said, experienced skipper with 41-foot sloop looking for crew of 4 or 5 to sail out for 3 months around Madagascar to Reunion and Mauritius. That was the islands that my friend Carl had gone to. I was like, oh yeah. So I apply and immediately get it. He didn't care if you had no experience at all. And he taught us over the few weeks. In fact, he was actually the local teacher there. And this was going to be his big trip. So we got a couple other, rough and tumble guys like me who were all local. I was the only one that was not from South Africa. And I think there were a total of 5 of us, including the skipper. Yeah, 5 or 6 of us, including the skipper, on this 41-foot sloop. It's actually turned out to be a very small boat. It's only 13 foot for those of you who like boats. It's 13 feet wide by 41 feet long. It was actually a racing vessel, which we turned out to be not a good thing to have. And anyways, to make a long story short, we tried to leave, but it was really, really rough weather. That is the Indian Ocean. Indian Ocean is one of the most severe weather pattern places on the globe. And I didn't know that at the time. In fact, I thought, oh, okay, great. Well, when we get to the islands, I'll stop off and I'll keep going to over to Australia or something. Well, you don't sail that way. Literally the ocean's currents don't go that way. They go the other way. I didn't know that. Well, we went out anyways, an hour and a half after we left, and it was bad weather, but we thought, okay, well, it'll be okay. An hour and a half later, they call everybody back to the port that they had let out. They have to let out boats. And they said, there's a storm coming in. It looks like it's turning into a hurricane. We tried to get back and we couldn't. Literally, we couldn't get back. The waves became so bad that, you're screaming over the top of each other. We're all green. We're not only green in terms of our experience, but we're starting to all turn green from the seasickness. And we finally realized we can't do it. We have to go with the wind, which was driving us south instead of going towards the islands, which were east. And make a long story short, we got driven south for 9 days. Way past the tip of South Africa into what is called the Roaring Forties. And the storm turned out to be what's called a Force 9 storm. Force 9 storm is 1 level below hurricane levels. I mean, we're talking 35-foot waves, 80-mile-an-hour winds. It ripped every sail on the boat. It ripped all of except for the main mast, it ripped all of everything else, all the jib poles. Everything leaked because all the joints got, and it was just constant storm. And I was deathly sick. And in fact, I was incapacitated. And I'd never experienced in my life being incapacitated where everyone around you is figuring out how to get up and keep going. And I could not lift my head. Even now I look, I tell the story, I think you couldn't lift your head, but when you're that nauseous, and I'm a strapping guy, I've been traveling, I've been walking for, miles, and I'm a carpenter, so I'm built, like a brick house. And how this relates to young kids and getting out there, it's worth a storytelling because it shows you, you have to draw within you from the depths no matter where it is. I don't care if you're not sailing or not. I don't care if you're sitting in a college right now and going, this is really stupid, or trapped in some small town like I was, or, you're stuck in some way. To make the long story short, I got to a point where I was hallucinating. I was so dehydrated and so sick. It was like probably, past 48 hours, and they're running the boat without me. And we are still going in the wrong direction. And the noise level is like a train. It's constant. There's not one moment of respite. It's horrible. It's just the worst thing. And everything is wet. I would hear my fellow people my age, when they would be woken up for their shift, they would weep. These are men, and they would weep from exhaustion. And I could not help at all. It got so bad that I was hallucinating. I would have, it's dark, it's even in day, it's dark because there's no sun out. Everything is, and storms are crashing. Waves would crash over and turn the boat, and you would hear everyone screaming. And here I am strapped in to my bunk. And when the boat would roll, I would throw up again over everything. And then I would, all the gear is turning, water is coming in. I mean, this is what it's like. And I'm not able to help anything. And in fact, I remember thinking if there was a gun on board, I would have shot myself, and I would have been okay with it. Just get it over with. So I'm at the point where I'm hallucinating, and I'm hallucinating with my eyes open. I remember that. And I remember my mom coming to me like she would do when you have, really bad fevers as a kid. And she put her cool hand on my forehead. And then here I am remembering this like I hadn't remembered it ever. She'd reach over and get me warm sips of Pepsi. And I'm sipping this Pepsi in my mind. And suddenly I remember, oh, yeah, one of the crew guys brought on some Pepsi. So I yell out, I said, Lenny, can you get me one of the Pepsi bottles in the plastic with the the resealable top? And I remember he didn't even respond. By this point, he's so exhausted. He's one of those guys that's like taking care of this yank who's sick, who can't even clean up after himself, who's not moved, who hasn't lifted a finger, and they're like, oh, sure, I'll give you one more thing. And I remember gratefully, he's getting dressed because he has to go out for the next 4-hour shift of this nightmarish action up top. He hands me the Pepsi. I crack it open. I take one sip, and I could feel my whole system just kind of drop down. And I yell out to him. I said, Lenny, I'll take this next shift. And we were in teams of 2, they both just flopped back into their bed and didn't say a word. And there I got up, and I stood up, and I went, oh my God, I'm sitting up. And I would take another little sip. So I started dressing myself in every article of clothing I got. It's absolutely freezing up top. And I've got everything on. I'm getting all my wet gear on. I'm getting my balaclava, this wool thing that I had gotten so grateful that I bought that. And I pop up over the top and I open up the door, and there is two crew members. And I was going by the nickname Bone at the time because I'm 6'8", and they go, Bone, oh my God. I say, how's it going? And they say, it's hang on. And a wave comes and fills up the thing. I hear the skipper below yelling, close the hatch, the water's getting in. And so I quick get up there. They orient myself. They say, look, we've been, told by the skipper, this is the direction you're going. And there's this red glow. It's the only thing you can see. It's this red glow in this liquid. It's this floating gimbal of a compass. That's the only thing you've got. So I slide myself around. I take the wheel, and the wheel's, 4 foot in diameter. It's this big, big thing. And everything is done really slow because remember, you're in 35-foot waves, and as you come over the waves, you have to grab hold of stuff, and water's crashing and you're kind of hanging on. And finally I get situated and they go back down, and I say, look, don't set the alarm for 4 hours. Let me see how I can do. If I run into trouble, I'll just do it. So there I am, man. It's 4 o'clock, 3 o'clock in the morning, and I'm out there by myself, my Coke under my arm. And every once in a while I take a little sip, and I was still so sick as a dog, but I'm operable, and as I felt like, I got to throw up again, I would wait, I'd time it. So the boat would rock one way and then it would rock downwards. And I would just kind of lean out over what's called I forget what it's called. It's like this little board that goes around. And I could just throw up just over it. And the next wave would come wash it. I went, hey, I got this system down pat. So, we eventually got out. 24 days later, we finally landed at the first island of Reunion, and the journey continued. So, but what I want to do, if I can, just wrap up this story, is that, I wanted to go out. I wanted to get past the limitations that I was born into, that I had allowed into, that all the fears, the way you collapse onto yourself when you're insecure. And I really wanted to get beyond all those wounds. And those early books, and a couple of those really important people that I bumped into really taught me that you can be anyone that you want to be. Or maybe not everyone you want to be, but you can develop yourself so that you become more confident and more sure of yourself. And you feel like you belong here. That was a huge one, is that feeling of like, it's not random that you're here. You are here for a reason. I wanted to feel that strongly. I wanted to, if I felt anxiety, I wanted to know, I'm feeling anxious. How do I return myself to a non-anxious, state? How do I get beyond those wounds? How do I, ask different questions, and I really encourage people. It may not be travel. It may not be the thing you do, but you got to find a way to get out of the story you are in, because you are not your story. You are not your parents' upbringing. You are not your own stupid conclusions or generalizations that have hurt you. You've hurt other people. They're not accurate. You can drop them. You can learn how to get out, be there, and be more courageous, and learn more confident, and be more curious, and be more decisive and genuine and forgiving and perceptive, and, pay attention to people. And you really can learn to not live inside of one giant, generalization that is killing us as a culture. You really can learn to determine to choose to be here on Earth at this time, and just know you can grow into that, knowing that you are needed and that you matter, that this matters.
That's so powerful. It does matter. And your story matters. Who we are matters. And I'd love for you to just take us, like you've done this, just like I'm on the edge of my seat and I've heard this story so many times, but I'd love to hear, like, take us from the trip is over, life goes on. Give me like where you are now in your life.
Yeah. Well, there's the continuity stayed. It's not like there's moments, there's not periods where you go, well, what do I do next? But one of the things I got introduced to after I left Africa, I ended up in Australia for 6 months. And while I was there, I met for the first time ever people deeply into this kind of growing movement of natural wellness. And it just hit me like a poem. It right up my alley. It just felt right to me. It's like it made a lot of sense. It certainly made a lot more sense than, I don't know, the standard medical model. So when I got back, I thought, oh, this is what I want to do. And I think I want to study nutrition first. So I went to a school and studied nutrition in Boston called the Kushi Institute. And that really gave me a nice understanding that, you can repair so many, almost all of the health problems that you have if you understand how to detoxify the body and eat foods that actually heal the body instead of change it. So I started on that path and I went to school, and then I thought, well, maybe I'll start making products or something. And then I found a company that I really liked, whose products were revolutionary. And I thought, well, I don't know how to market this, but maybe I can learn how to become a good educator. And I started to do that and became very successful. And then I saw people who were on stage, and I thought I could be a leader like that. I could learn to do that. So I went to a couple of really powerful, intensive workshops and read books on leadership and started doing that. And then I realized, I met a couple of authors, and I thought, how do you write a book? How do you write a book? But I thought, wait a minute. And then sure enough, asking them questions, my wife says I can be really obnoxious. I get into a party and I corner some poor soul, and I'm like, yeah. And then what did you do there? And then how did you do that? I can really, really become kind of obsessive, and she has to pull me off and go, why don't you circulate amongst the party and let this poor human being that you've cornered. But I did. I met other authors, and I went, I can learn to do this. And the same thing too. It was like the standard way, of course, is that you write a book and then you give it to somebody and hope that they print it. And then I met someone who went, nah, I don't do that. You can just self-publish. Self-publish? That's right up my alley. So I self-published all 4 of my books. They still sell on Amazon. And then, I did finally develop into my own company, and where I developed my own formulas. In fact, my drink, Brain Tonic, at one point sold in 1,300 independent stores and every Whole Foods across the country and in Europe. And they invited me to give a talk over in the Ukraine and Russia. And then, and I've just, in fact, started a new company called Synaptic Scientific, and we are coming out with a really, really cool cognitive formula that I've been thinking about making for like 7 years, and finally, decided it's time. Kind of a non-caffeinated, think formula that's very effective. So that's kind of what I turned into.
What I love about that, Scott, is you never stopped being curious. Like, you continued to ask questions and to learn. And so that very, very beginning of your world took you through to where you are now. And I just have a feeling that in, 40 years, you and I are going to be going, well, maybe 30, and maybe stretching my years here, going, okay, so what's next? Because that's what life is about. And when I asked you to be on this podcast of, it's new, it's different, we'll see where it goes. But part of my reasoning is because I believe our stories are personal, but they have collective impact. And I know that your story, as I listened to your story about being on the boat, I don't know, is it a boat or a ship? My dad was a sailor and would scold me for using the wrong word. Is it a boat?
A boat.
Or
yeah. No, definitely. Sailing boat.
A boat. So on a boat, as I listened to it, and my children, I have 4 of them, always scold me, and they're like, Mom, not everything has to be a lesson. In my world, it kind of does. And I listened to that, and I think a lot of us kind of feel that way right now in the pandemic. I'm hoping by the time this is released and down the years, as people listen to it, it's long over. But in the middle of it, it feels like we are immobilized sometimes. But when we listen and remember who we are, it makes a difference. But if you were to say, however you'd like to say it, you shared your personal story. what is a collective impact you hope it to have?
You can be reborn. You can be reborn. You can make a decision and say, I'm going to let my old self pass on. It's been great, or it's not so great. And I'm going to let that part of myself die. And I'm being reborn. And I'm going to choose how to be reborn. I'm going to move in this way. And I'm going to choose this direction. And I'm going to choose these people to be around. And I'm going to take on these personality traits and I'm going to strengthen them. And that old personality trait that I ended up, that addiction to that, or that behavior, or that anger, or that holding on, or, the personality traits that humans can get into that I have experienced. I thought, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to do it that way anymore. I would suggest look up, the best human traits and get the list. Literally look it up on Google and then stare at them. And you're going to find, I think every human that does that, and you get the, 300 positive human traits, not all of them pop out at you, but the ones that do, that's what's calling to you. Be that from this point on. You can be reborn. And I am not a religious, I don't belong to churches. I have a real hard time with, calculated religion. But the idea of being reborn, that doesn't belong to them. That belongs to everyone.
I believe that in my soul. I had a mentor who once told me, I don't know if I believe in reincarnation over lifetimes, but I believe in reincarnation in this lifetime. So thank you, Scott. We could sit for hours and talk, and I want to hear more and more of your stories, but I'm so glad that you are here today. I think that makes such a difference. So coming back full circle, Scott, what a gift. Thank you so much for being here. It has truly been a treat. Scott's story of living bravely and with curiosity and with rebirth in this lifetime is a reminder that life will always have challenges, but it's what we do with them that matters. How we face the world with curiosity and aliveness. What was true in 1974 and 79 and 88 is true in 2021. Ask questions, be curious. And I'm going to read Edgar Mitchell's one more time. You develop an instant global consciousness, a people orientation, an intense dissatisfaction with the state of the world, and a compulsion to do something about it. From out there on the moon, international politics looks so petty. You want to grab a politician by the scruff of the neck and drag him 250,000 miles out and say, look at that, you son of a bitch. Here at the Storyteller's Porch, we believe we are the stories we share. Keep living your story, keep being curious, and meet us next time here on the porch.
To learn more about our storytellers and our host, Jill Davis, you can find their bios and their social media links at thestorytellersporch.com. To make sure you hear every story with us on the porch, follow us on Apple Podcast, Spotify, Google Podcast, Stitcher, and wherever you hear your favorite shows. We'll see you next time here on the porch, where I'll be drinking some iced coffee and cream. What drink will you bring?